Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, I have another guest. You're going to enjoy this one. But as our ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, I will be sharing ideas, insights, best practices for building those professional relationships and helping you excel at business networking. Occasionally, however, it's not just me, but I'll bring on subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists. And these are people who are studying these things on an ongoing basis and can help us build better relationships and understand why we do the things we do, or maybe fall down on the things we're supposed to be doing. But today on this program, I have Liz Jacoy, and she is an author, international speaker, worldwide coach on transforming your mindset for not just your business life, but life in general. And she's widely recognized as an expert for being present and energized. But there's a story, and we'll get into it a little bit. 8 years ago, she was depressed and suicidal, and she was asking herself, is this all life has to offer? And of course, there was more. Thankfully, there's more. But after contemplating taking her own life one evening, she quickly changed her mind, and because she didn't want to leave her teenage children behind, she just realized there was more to it. And that helped her launch her on a journey. And she began to not only diagnose, but solve the cause of her suffering. And she began to study her own mind and worked with many world-class coaches, teachers, mentors, spiritual leaders. And she created her own methodology to help not only herself, but many others get unstuck and live their life to their full potential. Liz, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Frank. It's an honor and actually a blessing, and great to be here.
You know, when I was introduced to you and we kind of connected, and you and I have spoken, you know, I wanted to get you on the podcast, and people who know me, who listen to the podcast, know that one of the many things I'm fond of saying is that our most important relationship is with ourselves. And that's your business, is helping people. You work, your number one thing is you worked on yourself, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And I do want you to share a little bit about that. And maybe that's the jumping off point, where this came from, how you got to that point, how you got out of that point, and really how you see other people can kind of live their best lives.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. I mean, personal development has always been something that's intrigued me for decades. It started probably in my 20s, reading books. Anytime I seemed to have a problem in my life or something, I'd go to the bookstore and find a book and read it. But it was kind of this cycle of stress, anxiety, overwhelm. You do things for a while and you feel good, and then something happens in life and you stop working out or you stop reading the book, right? And so you fall back. And it's kind of like, what's going on here? And it took, I guess, the third breakdown that I had in my early or mid 50s when I contemplated. I mean, I always had suicidal thoughts, but this time I was actually planning it. And what I realized turned me around was that moment where I thought, I can't do this because of my kids. So I realized that there must be something in our thinking. It's the way we're approaching life by our thinking. So I started to, like you said, dive more into the neuroscience, the transformational psychology, hired coaches and mentors in that area. And I started examining my own thinking and realized that a lot of times it's the thinking about the problem that is the problem. And it's not necessarily the problem itself, right? Because it's the meaning that we attach the situation. And so I started to dive into that first. So when I looked at it and I thought, I understand why people commit suicide. I understand now why we have this suicidal thoughts, because the pain is so real. But if we can just link the pain to what we're thinking and recognize that that's the cause of our problem, and we can change the thinking, that's when you can change your life.
Oh, I love that. Thinking about the problem is the problem, not the problem itself.
Yes, because
Okay.
Did you want me to expand on that a little bit
No,
more?
yeah, absolutely. Because I think we all, to me, that's somewhat of a revelation, is that, it's, we hear this from time to time, Liz. Don't worry about the problems because you always end up conquering them. And to a degree, it's true. You have a busy day. Oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to get through Thursday. And what happens? We get through Thursday. We just take one thing right after another. And I'm not saying it's not painful, but we spend so much energy commiserating about Thursday that the commiserating is far worse than Thursday ever could be. We make it worse.
Yep.
So please expand. Thinking about the problem.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if I continue to think about Thursday, that's what I'm going to get as a result. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that's going on, not only the neurosynaptic connections they're only, it's kind of like your brain is like Google, right? When you put something into Google, you're going to find all the sources and all the reasons for that, right?
Right.
And it happens because when we're anytime between the age of 0 to 7, maybe even to 10, and I'm sure you've heard this before, we're just sponges. We're just absorbing everything from the world, and we're attaching meanings or filing it away in a cabinet somewhere in our mind. And so as we grow older, we just attach a meaning to a situation. So for example, let's say I'm thinking of rejection and that I'm always getting rejected, and that's what I'm putting out there, and that's what I'm going to see, because we have this reticular activating system in our brain that sort of filters that out, and that's the only thing we're going to see. And so maybe when I was supposed to meet a friend at the water cooler at recess, and they didn't show, and so we attach a meaning that that person doesn't like me, that person doesn't love me. And meanwhile, what happened is that person probably, maybe scraped their knee on the way to meeting you at the water fountain, but you don't realize that till later, but you've already attached a meaning to it. So it's the meaning that we give the problem is really key here as well. So when I tell people to start thinking about what they're thinking, it's really to take a look at not only what they're thinking, but when you're feeling, like you said, what was it? Worry? Did you talk about earlier? Worrying about Thursday?
Yeah.
Start thinking about, okay, I'm worried. Well, what am I worried about? What's the thinking, right? And so when you start dissecting what the thinking is, and you can start turning that around, you'll realize that it's the thinking causing the feeling. And it's really this whole principle around, that's what it's tied to, some kind of a belief that's formed from long time ago in our childhood. And so our belief dictates our thinking, which dictates our feelings, which then dictates our action. And as a result of that worry, that's going to either put you into action or inaction, like procrastination, or you run out to Starbucks, for the third cup of coffee for the day. And it's kind of like a distraction, right? And then, of course, it reinforces the results. The results are you're not going to achieve what you wanted to achieve that day or that week because of the thinking. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It becomes this loop, what we call a psychocybernetic loop, because that's all it is. It's all these neurons that have been formed and that sort of thing. So really, that's what I started examining, is what's my thinking? What am I thinking about? Because I had a weight problem. I was 80 pounds overweight as well. And I knew that it was emotional eating, but I wasn't paying attention to the thinking. I just knew that I felt bad. I just knew that I just had an experience that I didn't like, and I wish that I didn't like, and I attached a bad feeling to it. And then I started examining my thinking. So what I started to do is, started to sort of cue into, I'm feeling bad. I'm walking towards the fridge. What am I thinking as I'm opening the fridge door for that late night snack that I don't really need?
Right.
What's the comfort in it?
Right.
And so once I started examining that, that's when I could stop it and say, okay, no, let's turn this around. Is it true that, so-and-so rejected you today? Well, no, it's not true. It's just not the time and place. Is it absolutely true that they don't like you? No, because we've had good conversations in the past. And then what is true? Well, what is true that this is not just the right time for them, or this is not the right place for them. And then you can make a new decision and say, maybe next time I'll reach out to them and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like starting to examine the problem. And the real problem is what you're feeling, which leads you to that action or inaction.
Yeah, I have a million things going on in my head right now as you were talking, and that's good. There's the study out there where they told people, don't think about the pink horse or something like the pink pony.
Right.
And you can't help but think about a pink pony or purple or whatever it was. You probably know the study, but you get the point. It's that suggestion. I was talking to one of my franchisees yesterday, and he was, and this really kind of ties back to networking, because he almost didn't launch a business initiative because he had a bad experience. He had a failure before. He said, I almost didn't do it, Frank, because I had a failure before and I was worried I was going to have another failure. And he was excited because he didn't fail, but in that moment, it kind of scared me, because it's like, oh my gosh, what are the things I might not be doing because I had a bad experience before? And again, it relates all to this, to the personal relationships or the professional relationships. People don't reach out to somebody because they don't feel worthy. People don't go to the event because, they don't feel worthy, or I had a bad experience, or I don't know how to do small talk, or, I got a client there and that client ended up suing me. Well, that was yesterday. Today is a whole different day.
Exactly.
Right. We get stuck in these things.
Yeah. And so I think what people need to do then is, when that happens, is recognize it. To me, there's no such thing as failure. And it's funny, I was having a conversation about this with someone else the other day, and we're talking about, have you ever had that question asked you, like, where have you failed in your life and what you do about it? And it's like, yeah, how do you answer that question? Because I don't look at it as a failure. Right. I look at it as an opportunity to learn. So maybe that person that sees, I failed in that business, great. It's a good thing that you failed. Now take a step back and take a look at, okay, what could I have done better? What didn't work? What worked? Because sometimes we always look at lack instead of looking at what did work. Maybe there were some really key things that really worked in that business or that networking situation. Instead of looking at, going down that rabbit hole, maybe start take a look at that. And I think that's just a natural human being. I still do it.
Sure.
Right? It's just natural. It's because of a primitive part of our brain. It wants to keep us safe. So anything that's not normal or not usual or not normal or not part of our usual day-to-day operation, our brain goes alert, alert, alert. Right. When we know that there's nothing to be fearful of, right? It's just, so if people can recognize that, when you get that bad feeling, it's not that, so you had that bad experience where, and a lot of people have in business where they've got to jilt it out of something in their business, but look at it as, okay, what can I do differently to set up so that doesn't happen again? And what was the good thing that came out of this business? You also mentioned about networking, about, when it comes to networking, is recognize that when you enter a networking situation, just take a deep breath and breathe and relax, because you're going to enjoy the experience much more. Because like you said, if you're already thinking about something that's catastrophic or not going to go your way, guess what's going to happen? And that's just because the way our brain operates. It's like if it's called the reticular activating system. You've already primed your brain for that thing to happen. And then you walk out of there going, I knew it. That's what was going to happen. But if you do the opposite, try the opposite. Take a deep breath and try the opposite. And also look at all those other times and situations where it did work out. You had a good, to be honest with you, I'll share with you an experience that happened to me this week. I was in a networking group, and I felt, you go out into breakout rooms, and I felt dismissed by this one person about what I do, and just kind of skimmed over me and moved on to the next person in the breakout room. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to wait till the end, and then I'm going to ask him a question about coaching and what he thinks about coaching and what I do, and just sort of help him explain that there's different types of coaching out there. And that was a real revelation for I could see the other people in the group. And then I thought, okay, before I go to the next breakout room, I'm going to make sure I breathe, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to set it up that everyone understands and I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be listened to, and I'm going to be able to speak. And so when I set that up, the next room was, I barely said anything. I think I uttered a couple of sentences, and all of a sudden all these people were telling me, reflecting back and paraphrasing what I was doing, but even expanded on it. And I went, oh my God, this shit really, sorry for the language, but it does, right? So it's all about how you think, right?
Yeah,
so, and you can do it on a moment by moment basis. You can change your thinking. And the best, I guess, for anybody listening to this podcast is if you find yourself going down, you're not feeling good, you're not feeling bad, you're feeling bad already, like start accessing your feelings and your thoughts and trace it back to the thought and just take a breath, especially when you're in that meeting or so. It only takes 10, 15 seconds to really take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And what's going to happen is you're going to engage that part of your nervous system, what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's going to allow you to be present, allow you to be creative, allow you to listen. And and then you're going to engage, and you're going to enjoy the engagement much more than if you're in that sympathetic part of the nervous system. So it really comes from what I teach is 2 states of being. You can only be in one state of being or the other. You can't be in both at the same time. But when you're in a meeting, that's the best advice I can give to people is just breathe. Take that 10, 15 seconds to just breathe, and that's going to help your nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, you sympathetic, parasympathetic. I have trouble keeping those things straight. I always just term it as we have a fast brain and we have a slow brain. And if we engage that slow brain, which is the more recent part of the brain, the neocortex, we dismiss the fast part of the brain. And the fast part of the brain is the one that's fight or flight, right? It's like, oh, I'm nervous, I'm going to be a wreck. And what you did in your story, which I thought was great, I'm going to engage the slow part of my brain. Fear is natural. We're hit with fear all the time. You can never stop fear. It's what we can control is our reaction to it. I'm coming into this networking event and I'm going to be my best self, and I'm going to, I don't want anybody to think I'm going to come away with a client. It's magically going to happen, but I'm going to have a good experience with this. I'm going to help somebody. I'm going to get some names. I'm going to make some friends here. This is going to be great. And then that just that calms your nerves, right? And then when your nerves are calm, you're just going to show up better. And then that helps fulfill a better prophecy for you, if you will. That's
exactly. And if you find yourself during the meeting going back to what I call a primal state, what you called the fast brain, then just take a few seconds. It doesn't take long to breathe. Breathe in and out, and that'll move you back into. And then later, after the meeting, go back and examine, okay, what moved me into primal state? What moved me into that stress? What moved me into worry? What moved me into rejection? What was my thinking behind it? And once you start examining that, you'll see some patterns. And what you mentioned was fear. Yeah, there's typically 3 fears that we have in our human existence, and that's the fear of rejection, not being loved or liked, the fear of I forgot what the second one is, but the fear of not fulfilling our potential, and the fear of not good enough. So those are the 3 fears. And anything that falls out of that, like not good enough, is I'm not as far along as I should be, right? Or I'm never going to get this business off the ground, or nobody's ever going to connect with me in that networking group. I don't know how to connect with people. But if you look at all the things that you have already accomplished and you already have connected, because I'm sure you have, but it's just natural, like you said, it's a natural part of our brain to have that fear to say, I'm not good at this. I'm really right. But once you can start rewriting that story or that script that you've got for yourself, if you start paying attention to it and really pay attention to your thinking.
Well, I think that the other thing to mention is that listeners, you have this fear. Everybody else has it too. It's not like we're all on equal footing when we go into these events. And if you really help other people out of their fear, then that conscious, hey, that engaging the slow thinking of, okay, how am I going to help this person, knowing that they're probably as fearful as I am. How can I help them? How can I put them at ease? Just helps put us at ease. This has been great. Let me shift gears here. I want to talk about your business, what you do, how the listening audience can help you, how they can get a hold of you. We can certainly put your website in the show notes. Liz Kajoy, Jacoy. I got that backwards. Anyhow, I'll let you talk.
Okay, sure. Well, I help mission-driven business professionals who, may have a small business or work for a corporation. And it's really taking a look at that they're frustrated because they feel they're not as far along as they should be. And what I take a look at is really help them look at what we talked about today. What are those distractions? And the distractions is typically the thinking, maybe some other distractions, and how the distractions like anxiety and overwhelm, how much time they spend in anxiety and overwhelm. And it's really taking a look at reducing that time gap. And we do that through different processes so that they can feel stronger, they can feel energized and be more present. And when they do that, many people in my business have, increased their income because they now realize they have time. Oftentimes people come to me as they say they don't have time, and we really examine how much time they're spending. So that's what we take a look at. It's a methodology that I've developed just utilizing my mentors. Yeah, anyone can reach out to me, like you said, through the website. My email is lizjacoy@gmail.com. I even have a Facebook group called Living an Energized Life, where I go in once a week to post something inspirational, motivational, and just to get people to start thinking about making some changes in their life. So
this has been great, Liz. It's Liz Jacoy.com, and I'll put this in the show notes. Jacoy, Liz is Liz. Jacoy is Jakoi. And again, I'll put that in the show notes. But for those who are listening and able to write it down, you can. If you're driving, just drive. just drive. And I'll put it in the show notes. Liz, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Frank. And I'm really honored, and it's been a great pleasure chatting with someone as well who, brings it. I love the fast brain and slow brain. That seems to help people. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to quote you when I say that
you don't need to quote me. It came from Danny Kahneman wrote a book. I think that's his name. And that's the name of the book is Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It's a great book, but I don't know. I think he uses the term. That's how I keep track of it. That's just how I keep track of it.
That's a great way.
Yeah.
I'm going to check that book out. So thank you. I learn something new every day myself. So there you go.
Well, that's what people always ask. Why do you podcast? That's why I learn a lot of things. I meet a lot of great people, and I learn a lot of great things doing it. So this has been wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank. It's an honor.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.